Welcome back to the Down the Stretch segment, our interview on Get Tied On. I'm very happy to have Tom Bellhouse here from West Point Stable. Tom, before I even talk about you, okay. Which I will, I want to know the first syndicate that I go back remembering, and I don't know if it is the first one, you'll tell me, was Dogwood.
Yeah,
the one that people knew.
Yeah, I think Cod is considered widely as the father of the American partnership.
Okay. West Point, I know you were a person that bought into a horse before you became, vice president of operations on the Northeast, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think when I started with the company, well, I guess it's 2008. I started before that as a partner for about 5 years, just lifelong fan, and got involved and loved the experience. And it came at the perfect time in my life where it was a little, needed something to fill that void. And
so tell me, Tom, do you remember, or do you know, like the first time West Point started, like the first? Like, what year did they?
Well, it's 30 years ago this year. Terry and Debbie, it's kind of a great story. Terry was still in active duty.
Terry Finley.
Terry Finley, our CEO and president, he founded the company with his wife, Debbie. They still run the company to this day. Terry was active duty serving after his time at West Point. That's where the name comes from. He's class of 86 grad. And he was in the process of ending his military service to go out into the working world. And him and his wife, they've always had a love and a lifelong affection for horses and horse racing. Terry's dad got him involved into the game, who was a school teacher, and just lifelong love of the game. And unfortunately, they were just about, I think they had just claimed their first horse, and it was getting ready to run, and the Kuwait conflict happened, and no one was allowed to leave the military, officers that, their time was up, so to speak, and he ended up in at least another year in the military. So when the first horse that ever won was a horse named Sunbelt in the first start, Terry was on active duty, not anywhere near the racetrack, and Debbie stood in the winner's circle.
Was that a claim for themselves, or was that the birth of an actual syndicate?
Yeah, that was the birth. They had one or two people that they had been in contact with that they put the first thing together, and they dabbled for, let's say, a year or two, debating whether Terry wanted to go legit and sell life insurance or do other jobs and find his way. And then they made a commitment to each other that they would give it a few years. They had two young children at the time,
right?
And they went all in to try to do this thing. And the beauty of it was, you had a very young, handsome, charismatic West Point grad that could get on and share his passion for the game, and it was just the perfect time. We look at the Cott Campbells of the world, Cotton and Campbell. I mean, they truly opened the door to what you see all across horse racing right now. I remember the year Palace Malice won the Belmont. Terry and I, and Debbie and Jeff Lifson, my other coworker who's in Kentucky, we're all exactly the same age. We're all within a few months of each other. And Cott came up that summer when he won the Belmont Stakes with Palace Malice. And I said to Terry one day, I said, God, I hope when we're his age, we can strut around like a peacock like he's doing in those saddle shoes and his hat and the big smile. And he just come and won the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Wayne Lucas.
Yeah.
Like, just the way his demeanor, the way he carried himself, very classy, just very, he was articulate. You knew he was a Kentucky guy. But they were cut out of the same mold.
I literally, I think there was a time where, because he was the established, he had won Triple Crown races, and he was established, and he had a client base, and he was the man, that we were probably very competitive with him, wanting to be in the same conversation with him. And that's, we're talking 20 years ago. But as he got older and as we did a little better, there was more of an affection towards him, and eventually just nothing but flat out respect to see how he changed horse racing. He basically said, you know what, I can put these partnerships together. And even if he did have a couple of major players in on every horse and things like that, but he changed it. And, we like to think maybe we've moved the ball a little bit with, where we're at as a company. But now you see all the power players are in partnerships. Even the Micropulleys and the St. Elias, Vinnie Viola's, they're teaming up. And you see Bob LaPenta. Back in the day, Bob LaPenta was in every single big horse race in New York there was, it seemed, him and Nick Zito.
Right.
And now you see he's teamed up with Eclipse, and you see some of these synergies that have come, and it's changed the game, Wiz.
Oh, sure. I mean, look, I went to a sale recently, and I'm chasing champagne, glasses with a beer can. There was at the Timonium sale,
Mm-hmm.
I loved a Vino Rosso, and it was me, West Point, and Rapoli bidding on this horse. I had a $200,000 bankroll. Okay, that's it. I could not go any higher than that. I didn't even get a chance to bid.
Yeah.
Right? So, I had me as an individual with no other partners has, and I'm going to narrow it down to, I have my method of doing it.
Of course.
And I'm going to be in with some, unless I'm finding a gem in the rough, I'm going in with a horse that we all see, we all want.
Mm-hmm.
I have my bloodstock agents, I have my research, but I as an individual have no shot because I don't have the money to, you know what I mean? I'm chasing big money.
You'll see that coming up in the next few weeks at Keeneland in the first book.
Wow, yeah.
Book 1 and book 2.
Yeah.
You'll see that, and Christophe Clement is one of our leading trainers. He has a good number of our horses, and he also buys on his own, and he also buys and puts partnerships of his existing clients together. And he told me last year, he goes, that elusive 2-turn dirt horse for $300,000 at Keeneland doesn't exist anymore.
No.
It just doesn't.
And the only shot that I have if I want to bid in the Keeneland sale is book 4.
Right.
Book 5. Maybe I doubt I can even go into book 3. So, but there are things that fall in the cracks in 4.
Well,
and
Kenny
5.
McPeak has made a living out of it. I mean, he's the guy that comes to mind when I think of book 4, book 5, some of the great horses that he's bought over the years and that. And David Ingordo's been West Point's main bloodstock agent for the last probably 6-7 years. And, when you watch, the great bloodstock agents, the guys who really know the game, they can buy in any book.
Yeah.
It's great as their client base gets better that they end up going more towards book 1, 2, and 3. But for the most part, I look at a former contemporary of mine, someone who's near and dear to me, Joe Migliori, Richie's son.
Yes.
And Joe is doing some bloodstock work, and I know he has a great eye for a horse. I've seen him, some of the horses he's picked out and bought. But in the same vein as what you're talking about, he's going to OBS April and knowing that, or Timonium, and knowing he might have a cap of 150 or something like that, and you're going to find that diamond in the rough. The interesting part is when you go to more and more of these sales over the years, which I have, and I don't get me wrong, I am not a horseman. Okay, I love the game, and I have a lot of admiration for everybody that works, but I'm not somebody who's rubbing the hands down the legs and things like that. I know my limitations,
Right.
and I'm very respectful of the people who look at a horse and see those things. That's not me. I know what I like, just like anybody, and I love pedigree. I'm a big pedigree geek. But as far as actually looking at a horse, those people like David and Gordo and Donato Lani and
That's Baffert's, man.
Yeah, but you see them and you watch them, and it's no secret that most of these guys a lot of time are on the same horse.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone for 3 horses, 4. One I got, a nice central banker that has a great dam pedigree that probably, if all goes well, will start in New York in a couple
Wonderful.
months. I got as a yearling. I got outbid by a few $1,000s for Concrete Rose, and I got outbid.
Twirling Candy, yeah.
I got outbid by $25,000 for Maple Leaf Mel. Okay, so I'm in the game. I'm in the game. Unfortunately, I just don't have the chips.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a point where I have to stop.
Exactly,
you know?
and those sales, the two that you mentioned, both were timonium sales.
Yes.
Concrete Rose, I think actually David and Gordo
Gordo
bought her.
Right.
And she debuted here at Saratoga. We were in the race.
Yeah, no, I cashed out.
We finished third, and we loved our filly. And I'm like, who is a Rusty Arnold? Rusty Arnold, first-time starter?
Yeah,
Come on, and aired.
Yeah.
And Lascano, I think, rode her that day and
came from dead
last
and like blew away the field. It was like 15 or 16 to 1, dropped to 11 to 1.
Right.
But fortunately, I know about these horses because I'm actually losing the bid to it. So at least I got something out of the win pool. But let's go back. Let's go back to. So Terry gets claiming horses at the beginning.
Yep.
And he's selling shares of the claiming horses.
He was doing a little of both. He was in the Mid-Atlantic circuit. That's where he lived. Him and his wife, they ended up setting up shop in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, down in south. They're both Philly kids, Bucks County. And he's putting together some claiming partnerships. He's got a few Wall Street guys. He ends up teaming up with one of his mentors, Buzz Chase.
Okay.
And Buzz, Buzz was famous for Unbridled Song. He was involved with putting that the acquisition of Unbridled Song, and then subsequent, being part of that run where they got to the Derby and championship, 2-year-old championship. So it's they get together. And they're basically buying horses that he can afford and
still
running at Monmouth,
doing
horses. Some claiming, but going to Ocala and trying to buy some 2-year-olds at the Ocala sales. Back then, there was a lot more horses in the 2-year-old sales. There was more 2-year-old sales. So he would go and they try to find a couple. And eventually, they end up nailing a couple stakes horses, but mostly running in Monmouth in the Mid-Atlantic.
So this is back in the 90s now,
yes,
right? Okay,
yes.
Back in the 90s. When is it that you stepped in as a fan, a person wanting to get into
I stumbled across West Point. It was this brand new thing called the World Wide Web. And
I know about that.
Yep, and I had gotten my first computer. I want to say I got it in 1998 or 97, the big desktop thing, and lo and behold, I'd heard something on a broadcast. I knew about Cot Campbell and Dogwood, but I saw this thing, West Point Thoroughbreds, and Terry has always been extremely ahead of his time with technology. He's for lack of a better term, he's a tech geek. He loves any new gadget that comes out, any new software, anything. He's always fascinated and always has been to check it out. And somebody had turned him on to the web and said, we can help build a website, and it's going to help your business, and it's going to be the way people. And he was very visionary like that, and he got ahead of it. And they had a website, and I was reading about it, and it was fascinating that you could buy a share of a horse. And at the time, I was living in Oswego, New York, up on Lake Ontario, where I'd gone to college, and as my mother always says, he forgot to come home. And I basically was running a little bar restaurant up there and had a great life, and eventually went to work for a division of Chrysler, their extended contract division. Chrysler had their own brand of extended contract, and they had a separate division for that. And I got somehow... it all came together where I ended up being a field guy for them, as well as doing my bar in upstate New York and Vermont and New Hampshire. So what that did was, I'm still following along, with West Point and things like that. I still have my bar restaurant, but with Chrysler, I'm traveling all over upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and you're basically working unsupervised. I mean, you're basically out in the field. They give you a book. There's 150 Chrysler dealers, Jeeps, Dodge, and we want you to go see them and help them and train them and do these things. And it was really fascinating. But the best part, other than the great experiences I had, was when I traveled, all of a sudden I realized whenever I'm on this side of the state, I could just use Saratoga as my home base.
Right.
So I'm staying in the brand new at the time Hilton Garden Inn down on South Broadway. I was probably averaging, 25, 30 nights a year staying there just on my regular travel, and then was able to weasel into doing some other stuff entertainment-wise when the meet started. So here we are. I'm involved with Chrysler. I get offered a promotion. I moved from upstate New York back down by the city, and it was really a fascinating time in my life, but I didn't really love it. I'm a Long Island kid that ended up upstate. I was really happy upstate. I loved the lifestyle. So here I am back in the city. I'm not real happy. Job's going great, but I'm traveling 130, 140 nights a year in the hotels, and I'm coming back to like a one-room apartment down by the city. So lo and behold, I start getting real serious about getting involved with horse ownership. I have correspondence with Terry. I met him up here. I came up and we had breakfast together a couple times, but I hadn't sold my bar, and I all these things I wanted to do and then get involved. And lo and behold, he called me one day, and I had just given a big presentation, and it just got knocked out of the park. And I was getting ready to walk out to lunch, and my phone rang, and lo and behold, it's Terry Finley telling me about this beautiful silver charm filly he bought at a sale, and I said yes.
How much was that investment?
5% was $8,000.
5%.
Yep.
Okay.
And at the time, you used to get a really nice West Point golf shirt when you bought a horse. And I used to wear that golf shirt, and people say, that is a nice golf shirt. I said, you can get one too for only $8,000.
Right.
But and that's what started it all.
How did the horse do?
She was fun. I mean, she wasn't a superstar. She won at Aqueduct on Valentine's Day in the dead of winter. I always joke, we were in the last race on a Sunday on the dead of winter on Valentine's Day. I said, we were there so late that even the Jamaicans had gone home.
Right.
So we were there, and we win. Mike Gluszy rides. She goes wire to wire. It was her third career start. And
Name?
Bid for Silver.
Okay.
And we had a lot of fun. She ran in Saratoga. She eventually kind of fell down the claiming ladder, and Rick Violet, who trained her, Nancy Triola had been his assistant, and she had gone up on her own. She was Canadian. She went up to Woodbine. So we sent the horse up there, and she wins. Now one is a 2, now one is a 3, now one is a 4, 3 in a row up there in claiming races. And back then, you couldn't just watch Woodbine. So if some days up at the harness track, they wouldn't carry Woodbine. They'd have the chalkboard of what they were going to carry. So I'd have to drive down to the teletheater. I'd call down there and say, hey, you guys carrying Woodbine, just so I could see my horse race, because there was no, online stuff.
Right.
So a few years later go by, we're up doing an event up at Woodbine, and I meet the jockey, Corey Frazier, who had ridden my horse in all 3 of them. And we're in the barn area, and somebody introduced me. I said, Corey Frazier, there are more pictures of you in my mother's living room than me. He's like, what? And I tell him the story. But she ended up being a real nice horse. She came back to New York, ran an allowance company in the winter. But for her first experience, and the people and the friends that I made on that horse, I have the first winner's circle photo ever of her. And in that photo, I have 4 people in that who I'm still great friends. 2 of them I've had dinner with this last week. It's just...
That's the best part of it.
That's what changed my life.
That's the best part of it. My friend, Paul Kornman,
of
who
course.
I talked to him today. When I had the MIG on, we told stories about Win, an exclusive partner. And I go back to, me and the Source were friends way back, right?
That's crazy.
And I remember our friend, the Groner, right? He's never happy. That's why he's the Groner. So the Groner, they owned pieces of Win, and those people are still friends.
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, those great claims that Paul made, those people in the picture are still friends. When I scored a couple years ago with Street Trust on Labor Day here, that I shipped up, Tom was in the picture. I hope 30 years from now we're still in the same hospital room when I get that, and we have our picture hung up in the hospital room, because that's the memories that carry on. When you look at those Win pictures, it's something special.
There, and and we'll talk more about it. But you know, when you talk to people about owning a horse and partnerships, and you know, and there was a stigma to it in the years past when I first got started, like, oh, West Point, there's so many people in the winner's circle and this and that, and I laugh at that. I mean, now, especially 15, 20 years later, I really get a good chuckle when people complain about the winner's circle.
Did you make so that first horse, you made a profit? I mean,
oh no, of course not.
But you reeled off 3-4 wins, right?
Yeah, I did. We didn't pay any bills for a while, that's for sure. But okay. I mean, well, I think I did. Actually, I did get a check. I tell people, if you ever get a check in horse racing, you take a picture of it and you frame it and you put it on your wall, because
it's the last check you're going to get.
But it's the greatest feeling.
Yeah.
I tell people, if you get involved with a horse that breaks even, you're going to have the greatest time of your life.
So West Point's claiming, you know, back in the early 90s, they start going to some sales.
Yeah, we get a filly named Sweet Nanette. She was one of their first graded stakes horses, and I believe she was with, I don't know if she was with Dallas or Pat Byrne. She was with one of those two. And then came a horse, their first Breeders' Cup runner was a horse named Ethan Man. And both of them ended up being, you know, solid stakes horses. I can't remember if Ethan Man won like the Swale or the Hudge, one of those Gulfstream 7 furlong races, like he was one of the favorites for. And all of a sudden, that was the first time I'd ever seen like Terry on television, where all of a sudden it's like, wow, you know, ABC Wide World of Sports would be covering it on a Saturday afternoon, and you'd see that, and all of a sudden at that point the quality was getting a little better.
Exposure too.
Exposure was huge. And I think basically if you look at the company's history, you look at right in the early 2000s, you had a horse named Seattle Fitz. He won the Brooklyn. Richie Migliore rode the horse for Kieran McLaughlin. And the move to Kieran McLaughlin in New York, because Terry wanted to move more towards New York. He wanted to be where the big time was. And he had already had a relationship with Dallas Stewart. Dallas went out on his own from Lucas, and Buzz had introduced Terry. And they both were kind of young guns, you know, both young guys and getting in the game and wanting to make a difference. So Dallas and Terry hooked up, and then Kieran McLaughlin came along, and West Point had Rick Violet, and then they had Kieran McLaughlin and Dallas Stewart, and those were the, you know, that's when all of a sudden things started to change. We won the 2004, I believe it was, Brooklyn, and then 2006 was our first Derby starter. It was a horse named Flashy Bull, and he ran against Barbaro and that great class of horses. Right. I mean, Bluegrass Cat. I mean, it was just, Bernardini was that year. It was just a tremendous class. And he would run second in the Remsen, and he got enough points. He got into the Derby the year Barbaro. He drew post 20, unfortunately. But that was the year that things started to come together a little bit. And fast forward to the next year, 2007, Flashy Bull. Now, the company never had a Grade 1 winner at that point, you know, been in existence for
over 10 years.
15, close to 15 years. So Flashy Bull wins the Stephen Foster.
Grade 1.
Right, first one.
Right.
Inside the next 4 months, Dream Rush wins the Pyrrhus and the Test. Irish Smoke wins the Spinaway. And then Lear's Princess beats Rag to Riches to win the Gazelle. They win 5 Grade 1s in 4 months.
So now money comes flooding in.
Well, right? Now all of a sudden you're going to the Breeders' Cup with the favorite in the Sprint with Dream Rush, with Lear's Princess, who's the favorite in the Distaff. All of a sudden you got horses that people are talking about, and the company's coming into. That would have been that's 2007. And I started with the company as an employee in the beginning of 2008.
So now, when you come in, it's coinciding with the rise of West Point.
Right. Yeah. It's. Right? I mean, we're starting to really gained momentum off of that incredible year. The company's being honored to have, I mean, 5 grade ones to anybody's company. I
it's
mean,
just- yeah.
consider, and we didn't have 50 horses back then, Wiz.
No.
You probably had maybe 25,
Yeah,
30 horses.
right.
It was just insane the way it all came together after such a long struggle. But the beauty was, and the good part was, this is an exciting time. We're going to expand. That's why I was brought on, was we have New York. I'm going to try to expand into the Mid-Atlantic and Florida, because I'm not opposed to traveling and doing that, because
Right.
that's my background. And lo and behold, you know, the markets crash.
Right.
You know, all of a sudden, Bear Stearns, everything. And this is, you know, all of a sudden you're like, I just left a really good job and I'm going to try to sell horses.
And the market
and the market's just crashed.
And did that really have a severe effect on getting money? from
I think
people?
what it was I think everybody, I think we still had a good 2008 because we had horses on the West Coast like Awesome Gem. And we had, Awesome Gem had run 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Classic to Curl and Hardspun. And then we had Macho again kind of came onto the scene, and we had run 2nd in the Preakness. So we still had mojo, and people were saying, wow, West Point, the West Coast, you have Awesome Gem. On the East Coast, you got Macho again. Things are really going. But you knew inside that we were struggling to raise capital. Like, we weren't getting, you would have thought after the 5 grade ones, we'd had a ton of people lined up at the door to jump in. And we really, the first 2008 was okay, but 2009, 2010, we struggled. I mean, we just trying to get people in the door. And on the outside, people were saying, hey, West Point's doing great. You're running all these big races and you had nice horses and they hide your blemishes. But internally, trying to raise capital when people just didn't know, you know, with the home mortgage rates and the banking and everything that was happening, it was a challenge, but we survived it.
So, like, just to explain to the viewer about syndication, you have X amount of horses in your inventory.
Correct.
That you get. So you have to get, you know, you have a horse, say horse A,
Right.
and you buy the horse at a sale for $150,000,
Okay.
hypothetically.
Sure.
So now you have this horse for $150,000. What do you? So it's a yearling. You go to the yearling
Okay.
sale because you also buy. Do you buy weanlings?
We have maybe once or twice in
But
the past.
that's not your game.
No, not at all.
So yearlings and 2-year-olds.
Yeah, back then it was almost exclusively 2-year-olds. Back in the mid 2000s to late 2000, it was almost all 2-year-old in training. That's where we had the most success. It's where we actually felt we had an advantage comparatively to the yearlings. We didn't have those deep pockets like you were talking about earlier. We didn't have those kind of dollars to be able to raise that kind of capital on a yearling. But I guess the point being, you know, as it started to come together, you know, you're trying to maximize the dollars. Our model, the way West Point is designed, it is we never really raised capital in advance. Okay, so there are people out there, there's syndicates out there that say, hey, we're going to go buying yearlings this year, put up your X amount of dollars, and then they'll have X amount budget, and then they'll go buy yearlings, and you get a piece of the whole class. And fiscally, that's probably the smarter way to do it.
Right.
But what we've done over the past is we don't raise capital. We'll go to the sale, we'll buy the horses, and then within 24 to 48 hours, we'll turn them around, syndicate them, and bring them to market, and let our individual partners or prospective partners buy on whichever horse they're interested in rather than a total package.
Okay.
And at that point, we will have told you who the trainer is. And
So let's break this down a
Sure.
little simpler for people, the public, to understand, so they may come to West Point, really understand the economics of
Sure.
it. So yearling and 2-year-olds are different.
Sure.
There's one, you're a 2-year-old, you hope to get to the races later in the 2-year,
Sure.
you know, later that year, or as a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
The yearling you have to sit on until you start training, you know, as a 2-year-old. So it's a longer.
yeah, like we just bought 10 yearlings here in Saratoga in the last week and a half with the open sale and the New York bred sale.
Okay.
Those horses all got on a van and went to Ocala, Florida.
Right.
Okay? In the next month or so, their lives are going to be introduced to becoming thoroughbred racehorses with the breaking process, the saddle. So with yearlings, you know, the difference between 2-year-old and yearlings is yearlings are traditionally a little bit more risky because more things, they've never had saddles on them. They've never had a bit in their mouth. So more things can change and happen. However, you're usually able to buy a lot more pedigree and bang for your buck with a yearling than you can a 2-year-old sale. If you get to the 2-year-old sale, you're able to see, obviously you know their pedigree, you can see their conformation, and then you have the added advantage of the athleticism of seeing them on a track with a saddle and galloping. Now, it used to be if you got a 2-year-old that had athleticism, pedigree, conformation, Sheikh Mohammed was going to buy him. So we used to have to give something up to be able to compete on the 2-year-old market, and usually that was pedigree.
Right.
Where we'd try to buy a good athlete at the sale and give up a little on pedigree to just, you know, find a horse that we think could make a difference. And that really was the West Point model for a long, long time. I mean,
Right.
we didn't get into buying nice pedigrees probably until the last 7-8 years, what you would consider nice pedigrees.
So West Point goes in, purchases yearlings with their own money,
Sure.
and 2-year-olds with their own money.
Correct.
So now we're going to use horse A,
Right.
at $150,000
Sure.
for both yearling and 2-year-old.
Sure.
That's the purchase price.
Yep.
They buy a yearling for $150,000, and soon after, it's out for syndication.
Correct.
So, what is the markup on? It's different from a yearling because you're sitting on it longer.
Well,
than
you're
it is-
building in, with our model, we build in the cost of training until the horse turns 3. So whether it's a yearling or a 2-year-old, the margins aren't really very much different because we're going to build in those costs as part of your base, built in right into the cost. So when, let's just say you're buying a horse in April, then you know you're going to have 8 months of training, transportation.
You're talking about a yearling or
a 2-year-old.
2-year-old. So you buy the horse in April.
Right. So there's 8 months of expenses that will be built in just into the base price of that horse without even markup. Just here's what a horse costs. Here's what your bloodstock agent costs. Here's what pre-sale costs, because you have to pay for the veterinarians, and in a way you're paying for the horses you don't buy just as the ones as you do, because you have to vet them all.
Salaries.
Well, that'll come into it, but yeah, as far as the vet and the bloodstock agent, the pre-sale, that's kind of fixed. We build that right into each horse. You have mortality insurance. You have the legal of creating the LLCs and the tax preparation that'll have to be done. And then basically what we try to do is we try to make about 40% markup on the total number. So if we're able to, if we buy a horse for $100,000, you should expect that it'll syndicate for about $300,000. And then, so $300,000, a 5% share would be $15,000. Your $15,000 gets you 5% of the horse and covers all your expenses until January 1st of that horse's 3-year-old season.
So you, a customer, a client buys in, pays the whatever.
Yeah, let's say $15,000.
$15,000.
Yep.
They don't have to ante up any money until the first of
the horse turns 3, and at that point, in this day and age, let's just say $60,000 a year to keep a horse in training on the major circuits. Little high, little low. So what I tell people is the worst case scenario, the most expensive scenario, is you have a horse at the track and running, and he's not hitting the board. So you're paying for all the soup to nuts, things that a horse needs at the racetrack. You're probably, that $60,000, we do everything on a quarterly, say 5% is $3,000. We do everything on a quarterly basis. So you're probably looking at $750 to $800 in maximum exposure a quarter for your 5%. And now any earnings would defray those costs. And if you get lucky, we do West Point, we do our disbursements on a quarterly basis, just like we would do our billing and our capital.
To our interview with a great guy. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Wiz.
So when I met with you Sunday, you gave a great, because the numbers in my head, I'm a numbers guy.
Sure, of course.
It adds up and doesn't add. It adds up for your business model. Makes a lot of sense. You got to mark it up. They're not paying bills. They pay on the 1st of the January 1st. They start, it's the business model. But I find you can't really make money. It's hard to make money.
Yes.
Right. So, but you gave a great analogy, and I loved it on Sunday, Tom, when we met.
The season tickets?
Tell the viewer, because what you're paying for is the experience, too.
Right.
Tell the story that you told me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's an entertainment lifestyle model, okay? We're selling access, we're selling experience. I personally have always felt that if you look at your horse ownership experience as buying a 2-year season ticket to your favorite team, let's say it's the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox, whatever the sport, you get to go to the games, you get to hang around with a lot of like-minded people who root for the same thing, you're going to make some friends, maybe you go to the playoffs, maybe you go to the Super Bowl. With us, we have events, we go to the Derby, we have the Breeders' Cup. But at the end of the 2 years, hopefully you had a great time and made a bunch of friends, but you shouldn't be expecting any money coming back, just like you would a season ticket. If you go in with that mindset, I don't think you'll ever be disappointed. Now, you might be disappointed with the performance of the horse. Listen, we know that. And we talk about, let's say we buy 40 horses a year. We know that 25 of them aren't going to be what we dream they'll be. It's just the numbers. We're hoping 15 to 20 of them are that allowance or stake horse, but the numbers of the industry say that isn't going to be the case. But if you all of a sudden, for us, you get involved and all of a sudden you're involved with your horse, we want to become your, quote, horse racing team. We want you to think of horse racing like, hey, this is my stable, these are my colors, and guess what? Even if I don't own horse B, that's my friend, the Wiz, he owns horse B, and we're partners on horse C, so all of a sudden you have this vested rooting interest that, like, we want you to take emotional ownership of the whole stable.
I get it, because on the backstretch a lot, almost every day I take a walk onto the backstretch, visit some trainer friends of mine, watch horses work out, kibitz with some people, and the experience of just getting your owner's badge and parking privileges.
Sure.
That's worth something that you can't put a real price tag on, because it's the experience. It's feeling part of the game.
So last year, closing weekend, we run a horse named First Captain in the Jockey Club. It was that closing, I think it was that closing Saturday or Sunday. And he runs third, runs a good third to Olympiad. And then in the last race of the day, we run in a maiden claimer, and we win the race, and the horse gets claimed, right? It's a bummer she got claimed, but it wasn't a good claim. I mean, the horse had issues, and as far as just that she had a cage bit and stuff. If you were there, you would never have claimed her,
right?
Just because she had stuff going on. So we win the race, and a group of partners were all there, and Flightline's running in the Pacific Classic that night.
Right.
So a big group of us, we just walk across the street to the King's Tavern together, and we watch one of the greatest races I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
But all these people, they didn't own Flightline. But they were just part of the team, and they owned this maiden claimer that just got claimed and won. And all of a sudden, it was just like, there's a pride to it, just like you're saying. You're on the backstretch, you see a trainer friend of yours from 20 years ago. When he wins at the race, I know you're happy.
Of course. Of course. And it's like, I'm not a golfer, but my good friend here golfs. Tom Mello golfs every week. They go with friends. Afterwards, they have some drinks. Right? You're paying a lot of money to play on that golf course. And you may be a scratch golfer, you may be a lousy golfer, but it's the experience.
Yeah.
And occasionally you're going to get lucky.
Sure.
It's not everyone's a loser. There's going to be some winners. It's not. I mean, West Point is a very successful operation.
We had a horse. One of the most fun horses we ever had is a horse named Empire Dreams. Bought him
remember
for
that. Was that a New York bred?
Yep, 35,000. We bought him. J.J. Krupe down in Ocala.
Right.
Wins the New York Derby. Comes back the next year, and wins the Empire Classic and the Commentator, the two big races, one in the spring, one in the fall. Horse makes $800,000, right? The ride those partners got to go on, even though it was a New York bred, never ran outside of New York, and he was just a really, a regally bred son of Patriot Act. So, Patriot Act, every horse, every sire gets one good horse. That was Patriot Act's good horse.
And there's the betting aspect of it too.
Sure.
That because you do a great job. West Point does a terrific job updating their clients with information, with workouts, with sheets on race day. They do everything the right way. So here comes a horse. I own a horse, part of the horse.
Sure.
I'm getting information on West Point, right? I'm getting the workouts, working great, pointing for this race. The horse gets in a spot. It's live. You make a bet.
Yeah.
You cash a ticket. Well, what more fun is that? You may, in the end, not make any money on your investment per se, but you've made money on maybe a bet or two, and then enjoyed the experience that you can't pay for.
No, exactly.
Unless you're part of it. I get it. It is, because the thing is, I've prided myself my whole career, and even on this show, to be forthcoming, a person with integrity. I don't claim to be the best handicapper around. There's people better than me. There's people worse than me. I do my work.
Right.
And I put my work out there for sale. And if you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. I'm going to bet my money.
Right.
But what I respect more than anything, I have shitty days. Believe me, I have great days too. What I say to people is you got to stay the test of time.
Exactly.
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. In any investment, if you buy a mutual fund, if it goes down the first week, you're not selling your mutual fund.
Right.
You're believing in your money manager. Okay? You're believing in the Wizard. You're believing in West Point. And what we do, you do, West Point does, the Wizard does, and other people do too, some don't, is we give it our best, we're transparent, and we have integrity. And that we can live with.
Absolutely. I think, the two words you just hit on, transparency and integrity. Being able to, we joked the other day, I have no problem sleeping at night. I very upright, almost overboard to the point of being upfront with people about making sure they understand what they're getting involved with. And, last week we had a partner who had a good friend that wanted to get involved. I had never spoken to him, and he said, just send him the paperwork. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how I operate.
Right.
So I called the guy and had a great conversation, and he did get involved with us. But the original guy says to me, like, why'd you call him? I told you it was all. I said, yeah, I don't want to be here 2 years from now, and this guy's looking at me and saying, nobody ever told me this.
Right.
And it's just not acceptable. But the beauty is, and part of it's through technology, through the website, and through other avenues that we've been able to, our contact management system, things like that you can put it out there. And what stuff that you used to be really nervous about, very territorial about your information, or priority and proprietorial type stuff, is what you put it out there to your partners, and you're transparent with them. And it's amazing how many of them get it. That I'm on the inside of the velvet rope.
Right.
I got that parking hanger, and I can go in the backside. But you know what? That information you talk about, or occasionally, having our trainers on. We do Tuesdays at 2. A different trainer comes on for a half hour and talks about the stable. And hey, come on, you got, just like in the old days of the old TV show. Yeah, you got one for us? Or,
and you have to have a username and password. You have
Correct.
to be involved.
Yeah, you have to request it type deal.
And because Tom showed me one day, and I was just amazed about the amount of information that's available. I mean, and that's Terry's expertise.
Yeah, our team that, you have Terry, Aaron Birkenau is our racing manager and COO. Jeff Lowe is and Don Leonard all deal with all the information back behind the curtain, so to speak. And it's just fascinating that everything has become very content driven, as people, as you know, podcasts, there's everything that's out there that you can give them with information. They soak it up like a sponge, and it's helped our sport. And I think that was one of the benefits of seeing it through COVID, of how many people took interest on watching on TV and getting more involved, and it's helped our company.
Is every horse, like, you have a number of shares for every, is it always the same?
No, because what we do is, just like we talked about earlier, sometimes we only own half the horse.
Right.
So we'll come to the sale and we'll partner up with Bill Farish, with Lane's End and Woodford.
I see. So that's what you've been doing. That's
right.
That's the modern day syndicate.
So it was about 7 or 8 years ago we realized, we had an epiphany, that it's easier to sell half of 10 horses than 5 whole horses.
Right.
And it gives more selection. It gives more
inventory, more chances.
Exactly. And like anything in life, something's been on the shelf a little while, people tend to gravitate towards the newer, shinier thing.
Right.
And because there's less inventory, it sells faster, and that's helped us. But, I look at, how we do it, and putting things in front and letting people make their own decisions. It's worked for us.
Right, right. So I'd be amiss not to talk about Flightline, but what I want to tell you is that I've been in the game since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there when, in the 67 Woodward, when Damascus, Buck Passer, and Dr. Fager and Hedever raced. I then, obviously, Secretariat, Ruffian, Seattle Slew. I mean, I could just name off those great horses, American Pharaoh, Justify. Flightline, I would put in the elite category. Maybe, you can't really compare generations. I'm not sure, to me, when Secretariat won the Belmont Stakes, that particular race, I don't think there's a horse that could ever beat him that day.
Right. No, I agree.
Maybe on other races that Secretariat ran,
but not that day.
But I think that anyone that is a historian and knowledgeable about horse racing like we are, would have to say that Secretariat's race in the Belmont was the greatest performance I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Forgo, when Forgo won the Marlboro Cup with 136 pounds, racing 10 wide, switching to Willie Shoemaker on an inside speed bias track.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Another spine-tingling performance. Flightline, I put in my, of all the horses I've seen, definitely in the top 5. In that, and that's an illustrious list.
Yeah, Andy Beyer. I heard Andy Beyer say this, and I was always fascinated. He drew a line basically from Sunday Silence backwards,
right,
and Sunday Silence forwards.
Right.
Just because he felt that the game, the training methods, and the game had changed so dramatically. And I was just listening because the names you mentioned are, that's the rarest of rare.
Yeah.
I mean, even to be mentioned in the same breath as those horses. But it was really, he said, and it was just a great interview, it struck me that, other than maybe Go Sapper and, us coming forward from Sunday Silence, that Sunday Silence was probably underrated,
right,
what he accomplished, and then, Go Sapper and Flightline. And then those horses you mentioned in the 70s, to have so many of them in a 10-year period, to have a Seattle Slew, the brilliance of a Seattle Slew, to have the Forgo, horses like Aladar and Affirmed.
Let's even
Ruffian.
let's even throw Zenyatta in there.
Yeah, of
okay, I
course.
have to throw
Yeah.
Zenyatta in there.
She's amazing.
But Flightline is in that conversation of the greatest horses that I've ever seen in 60 years of going to the races.
It was
and
what a run.
So West Point bought a small percentage of that.
We
right?
actually signed the ticket for the horse here at Fasig-Tipton, and then we put together the partnership with, Costa Hronis was involved. His wife Stephanie, who I believe was at that sale. We just lost a titan of the game a couple days ago, Anthony Manganero from Siena Farm. That night that we signed the ticket, we went over there and we walked Anthony over, and he and Terry had a crazy fun relationship, and we had been involved with Always Dreaming with him, and he started giving Terry a hard time, like he wanted him to buy another horse with him, and Anthony came in on Flightline that night.
How much was the ticket? How much was
it? Was
$1
million.
price?
He was $1 million. He was night one. He was the sale topper of first night, and then the second night, I think first captain was the sale topper.
So $1 million. West Point is.
We owned 17.5% of Flightline.
So you bought it, but at that point,
but
you're
we started
100%,
putting it. Yeah, we're putting it
you're
all.
You're 100% owner of the at that.
Well, it all came together like right at that time. I mean, David had been in contact with Costa Hronis and Stephanie Hronis. We later found out that Jane Lyon, the breeder, had agreed to stay involved. So all of a sudden, these things are very very organic. It comes together quickly, but we were getting, the way it all came together was just
17% was
17.5 was West Point.
17.5, and we know what Flightline did. What is 17.5% when the horse was was?
Yeah. So basically, what happened was during his racing career, a couple of shares were sold. Some people we liquidated a little bit. A share in a stallion is the standard thing is a 40 share, so basically 2.5% ownership. We liquidated a little bit, diluted. A few people agreed to dilute, and we sold one of the shares right before the Met Mile.
Okay.
Took some money off the table, and that was based on a $40 million valuation.
So for that, 2%?
2.5%.
What was that worth then? 2.5%. How much money was taken off?
Basically $1 million.
The money? Okay, so right there you're taking money off the table.
Right. That was the first time. Right. Yeah, that was the prudent thing to do.
Right.
There was an offer, and I don't think it's secret anymore, but that Coolmore had made to buy the whole horse, like just buy the whole thing. Right around the Met Mile.
How much?
I believe it was 70.
70 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if West Point owned it 100%, he probably would have been sold for 70 million.
Hard to turn down 70 million.
We're not.
Right.
We don't.
Right.
We don't.
I mean, that buys a lot of Hattie's chicken.
Yeah, it does.
Right,
So, but and then over time, after the Pacific Classic, I mean, then things started to really heat up, and then I believe it was Keeneland approached Terry about this selling the share in the metaverse the day after 2 days after the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland.
Right.
And so we again had to find partners who would dilute down a little. So let's say you owned 2.5%. So we basically had one partner. I think he diluted down. He took a point off. So
now he owns 1.5 points.
Yeah. So he took a point, and a couple other partners took off half a point.
Which is worth more now because it's further into the...
So then they put it on this sale to see what it would be like the day after the Breeders' Cup. Like, what would it... And you're thinking, I literally had gone from the Breeders' Cup. It's my wife's birthday that weekend after the Breeders' Cup. We were going to drive down to Nashville. So we drive down to Nashville, and I'm sitting outside a breakfast place with my iPad watching this thing. And she goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't know. It's just crazy enough. Maybe come close to $3 million, which would make the total valuation $120.
Right.
Right. So she goes, really? I said, I don't know. It's just, there was so much buzz. The Breeders' Cup was amazing. He's going to be retired. There's most of the people that are involved are already breeders. They're not going to be selling all their stuff. And then it goes for $4.6 million.
For
2.5 for one share.
For one share. Total value of horse, how much? Total value.
Well, times 40. So like 200 million or something. You're like, yeah. But it was like make believe, you know? It was like you couldn't believe it really happened. And for those partners who liquidated down a little bit, that's life-changing money to some. Not that they aren't done very well in their lives, but there's a few of them. You know,
how many people were involved in that? You know, percent, all of the percent, what, 15, you said 17% already?
Yeah, it was probably, I think it was 6.
Oh, 6 life-changing big time,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, and it was just spectacular. I mean, it was so much fun for everybody involved. And then, and you know, the thought now of what comes next for Flightline.
Where's Flightline?
He's at Lane's End.
Lane's End.
Yep.
So Lane's End owns the horse.
The Flightline syndication owns it, but he's boarded at Lane's End, and they manage his career.
What does he stand for?
200,000.
Is that what
that
it
was?
is?
That was legit 200,000. It wasn't like posted 200. It was legit 200.
Yeah. Live foal.
Right.
200.
So hopefully, come springtime, everybody's happy.
So now the babies
will come in January, February, March.
Could you imagine what his book is like?
Well, his first book was insane. It was so beautiful. I mean, he had 153 mares he covered, or in foal, 153. They really managed it carefully. It was a spectacular book, a list of mares, and
give me a couple the elite
the one
mares.
that jumps out at me is, and it's just because of West Point's character, Just Whistle Dixie. She was the dam of.
Wasn't that a West Point?
Yes.
Yes.
But she was also the dam of like New Year's Day and of Mohiman, and you know.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy if this horse looks like 50% nice.
Well, the neat part about Flightline, and you know, not to be a commercial for Flightline, but you know, obviously he's a Tappet, and his dam was Indian Charlie Feathered was the dam, and she won at 2 on dirt in New York, and then became a stakes horse on grass. Her dam was a horse named Receipt. Well, Receipt used to be was the Shug McGahee, was that old Phipps family,
right.
And it was probably about, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago, they culled a few of the mares, and they, you know, kind of spread out the bloodlines a little. And if you remember, Chuck Fipke bought one of them that became a foundation mare for his Seeking the Soul, and
that
those
was all trained by Dallas Stewart,
right? Exactly. And then Vinnie Viola bought in on some of those mares, and he actually was the breeder. Vinnie was the breeder of Feathered, I believe.
Right.
So he sold Feathered. You know, was Receipt and Indian Charlie. You got Feathered, and she sold at public auction. Then she became a great horse, and Jane Lyon bought her as a brood mare, and then she came to Tappet, and now the game begins.
It's actually, you know, we have some really interesting sires out there.
Right.
You know, one in particular that I love is Gunrunner, obviously.
Yeah.
How could you not? Okay, the Winchell, you know, Blue Hen sire.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
You know, but, you know, the Flightline, I mean, that horse had stamina, speed, quality. I've seen videos my friend took. It was stabled in Kentucky. I don't know, Keeneland or Churchill. So I saw a video but the stride on that horse.
Yeah, Keeneland. He was amazing.
You actually have seen the horse a number of times close up. Is it as amazing as what I saw?
Yeah, the week of the Breeders' Cup, we get out there and he's galloping each morning. He's had his final work. He's there.
And he has to go 1.25 miles for the first time.
Correct. Yeah, because it was 1.125 miles at the Pacific Classic. And he's going by each day. You see him on Tuesday. You see him on Wednesday. You see him on Thursday. When he went by on Thursday, and this is so bizarre, if you've been to Keeneland, the Lexington Airport butts up against it.
Right across the street.
So in the morning, and he's on the backstretch, and he's starting to pick up a jet is taking off, literally like warming its engines up to take off. So as he's coming down the turn, this jet's coming down the runway. It was really crazy. And so he goes by, and Juan Leyva, the great jockey who's assistant trainer and rode him every morning, is like holding on for dear life. Like he's got him under the stranglehold. And like I said to Terry, I'm not coming out tomorrow morning. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I can't watch another day. This horse just galloping by. I'm afraid he's going to just run through the fence. He looks so strong. And he just, for those of us who've been around the game a long time and respect the game and know that all the bad things that could go wrong, like sort of like almost happened in the Met Mile, you know that bad things can happen. I felt in my heart, if he got out of the gate, nobody would touch him. He just looked so spectacular, and he's this gorgeous horse. And the funny part is he had a horrible injury as a young horse. He got impaled on his hind end, so he's got a nasty scar right on his butt. So when he comes out there and he's this big regal thing, and you turn to a corner and you see him, he's got this gash on his butt. Like, yeah, I'm a badass.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. No, that effort in the Breeders' Cup was Secretariat-like.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I said, I don't know who would have ever beaten him. I mean, it's like one of the great performances.
Yeah, I have
of
a
all
ton
time.
of respect for Life is Good, that he threw it down.
He just chewed the horse out.
I know, but he still tried.
He
He
tried
tried to
was
win
a
the
great
race.
horse.
Yeah.
That was a great horse being demolished by a greater horse.
Yeah.
And I mean, a great horse at any other year.
Right. You're exactly right.
Wins the Breeders' Cup.
Well, it's like the
Classic.
Pacific Classic. He beats by 19 1/4 lengths the horse that won the Dubai World Cup.
Right.
You know? I mean, you're like,
Yeah, it's crazy. Where would you like to see Tom Bellhouse 10 years from now? I mean, do you have further aspirations, or are you content in this position?
I think I'd love to be healthy and doing well, and West Point is, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of being part of the West Point Thoroughbreds family. I came in at a time when it was really at a pivotal time, a crossroads, and very, very proud of the success that we've worked very hard for. I've gotten involved with some charitable stuff. I'm involved with the Chamber of Commerce board here in Saratoga County. I love living here. I love being part of the community. I'm involved with the Belmont Child Care Advisory Board, and I think the next 10 years for Tom Bellhouse are going to be to obviously continue on what we're doing and hopefully find another great horse, but B, to try to give back to my community and the racetrack itself. I think the people on the racetrack they give.
I'll tell you where I'd like to see Tom Bellhouse 10 years from now. Exactly who you are today and what you're doing today. Because I think that West Point couldn't have a better representative for the West Point brand than you.
Thank you.
And I think that, you just stay where you're at, do your things that make you happy on the side. But they couldn't have found a better guy and a more, a man with integrity. I know a love for your family. You love Saratoga. You love the horses. I love you. I mean, I've just met you just on Sunday. We've kind of, known each other
Sure.
from afar. But I want Tom Bellhouse to be in the same position, because I know Terry Finley knows what I know. And you'll always be taken care of by a good man.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think that West Point will continue to flourish and do what they do, and you'll flourish in that position, but you'll also flourish in the things that you like to do personally, and with your kids and your family.
Right.
And that's where I would like to see Tom
thank you.
Bellhouse
That would
10
be
years
great.
from now. And I think that would be something, looking back 10 years from now, if this is the position you're in and you're doing the things that you really want to do, you'll be a very happy man as you are today.
Wow, thank you.
It was nice to have you on, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
You. My pleasure. Visit wizardracingsports.com and purchase now. Since 1986, the Wizard has been your source for the best handicapping products for the always challenging Saratoga meet. Wizard selections include analysis and wagering strategies for every race. Wagers are updated after late scratches. The Wizard wagers every day, backing up his opinions with his own money. Visit wizardracinsports.com and purchase now.